Good morning, class. How are you all doing? Today, let's continue our topic on post-war Philippines, moving on to a new era. Are you ready? Let's start. Today, we are going to continue on discussing who are the Philippine presidents and what they have done for the country. Do you have your favorite president already? Can you name the pictures of the president that I will show you? So far, we have discussed eight presidents, as you can see on your slide. And can you tell me some of the accomplishments of this president? It could be positive or it could be negative. President Diosdado P. Macapagal was elected by the Filipino people as the ninth President of the Philippines. He is most remembered for several projects accomplished during his administration. Macapagal signed into law the Agricultural Land Reform Code, the first official land reform act in the country. The code provided for the abolition of the tenancy system as it encouraged the tenant farmers to own the lands they farm through gradual payments. Prior to the code, tenants paid at lease or rent on the land they tilled. He also placed the Philippines currency, which is peso, on the currency exchange market. President Macapagal also changed the date of the celebration of the Philippines' independence from July 4 to June 12 to truly reflect the first declaration of our independence at Kawit, Cavite in 1898. The Macapagal administration tried to set up some solutions to the unemployment problem, just like the minimum wage law signatory and the creation of the Philippine Veterans Bank. It also initiated the official filing of the Philippines' claim to Sabah, and it was also instrumental in the propagation of the Filipino language. At the end of Macapagal's first term, as he ran for re-election, he was defeated by Ferdinand E. Marcos. In December 1965, Marcos was proclaimed the 10th President of the Philippines. Before Marcos became the President of the Philippines, he was Senate President for 3 years. His first term was marked with concrete achievements. There was gradual stabilization of government finance, more roads, bridges, schoolhouses, and other infrastructures were constructed. He is the longest president who served the country for 21 years. However, Marcos' economic development policies favored foreign investors who received many benefits from the government and were allowed much use of our rich resources. Apparently, Marcos declared and used martial law to remain in tenure as the highest government official in the country. In 1969, Marcos was re-elected for a second term, the first president of the Philippines to be re-elected. Unfortunately, his second term was marked by graft and corruption, which further widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Student activists and other civil society groups held protest demonstrations against these abuses. That is why people wanted to oust him, and so are his alleged ill-gotten wealth rumored and found in numerous Swiss accounts. This resulted to the awakening of the Filipinos to put up the EDSA revolution during the 80s. Under Marcos' economic policies, which gave more economic benefits to richer Filipinos, the Philippines became heavily indebted to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The country was in dire financial straits. Its problems on unemployment, poverty, backward economy, and increasing human rights violations were further magnified by the luxurious and excessive lifestyles of the Marcos family and cronies. But even so, He is the only president who had a record of building more schools, roads, bridges, hospitals, and infrastructures than all former presidents combined. Let us take a look on these infrastructures. For having served the country for 21 years, Marcos established the Lung Center of the Philippines, Philippine Heart Center, Philippine Children's Hospital, Philippine International Convention Center, Philippine Film Center, Folk Arts Theater, San Juanico Bridge, the Coconut Palace, and the North and South Expressway. Without these, we wouldn't be able to enjoy the Philippines. Immediately after the departure of Marcos and his family, Corazon Aquino was sworn in as the 11th President of the Philippines. Corazon Aquino is the first woman president of the Philippines and Asia. Among the first things President Aquino did upon assuming office was to convene a commission to frame a new constitution that would replace the 1972 constitution. She is the wife of Benigno Aquino Jr., who was the strongest critic of Ferdinand Marcos. She is also named the Time magazine's Woman of the Year in 1986 after the EDSA Revolution or the People Power, an event wherein Ferdinand Marcos was successfully ousted from his position. The rallies and protests of the Filipino people prove that they treasure democracy, freedom, justice, and peace, which is why a campaign of Tie a Yellow Ribbon was turned in as a symbol for freedom and democracy. It was President Aquino who initiated the abolition of the repressive 1973 Marcos Constitution and brought about the making of the new Constitution of the Filipino people. She set out to restore the democratic processes that had been disregarded by the Marcos government. She set up the process for a nationwide election to restore the Philippine Congress. National and local elections were held, putting in place leaders duly elected by the people. President Fidel V. Ramos was the 12th President of the Philippines and had the reputation of being a hard-working president. He continued the programs and policies started by the Aquino administration. FVR was the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines during Cory's regime before he became president. He brought back economic growth and stability in the country in spite of Asia's financial crisis in 1997. He tried to speed up the economic recovery of the country through his Philippines 2000 program. His dream was to make the Philippines one of the newly industrialized countries in Asia, just like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan. Fidel Ramos is the first and only non-Catholic or Protestant president of the Philippines. He is known as Asia's next economic tiger, and in his time, the Philippines celebrated centennial independence in 1998. Today, we learned about the Philippine president since the post-war era and independence. Did you learn something today? I hope you do. If ever you have questions, feel free to message me or leave a comment on the comment section below. Thank you so much, Grade 4, and see you again.